The battle for Blue Water Lake. The sun hung low over Blue Water Lake, painting the water with streaks of gold and orange. It was the kind of afternoon that made you forget the world's troubles. A gentle breeze rustling the oak leaves, the soft plop of a fish breaking the surface, and the distant laughter of kids playing near the picnic tables. I'd been coming to this lake every Saturday for nearly a decade, my tackle box at my side, my folding chair sunk slightly into the soft earth of the eastern shore. My name's Tom Harper, a 55-year-old insurance adjuster who spends weekdays wrestling with claims and weekends chasing peace with a fishing rod. Blue Water Lake, a 50-acre gem on the edge of Franklin, Tennessee, was my sanctuary. The city had turned it into a public recreation area back in the 70s, complete with walking trails, fishing piers, and signs that welcomed everyone. I had my spot under an old oak where the water was deep enough for bass and crappie. It was here, with my line in the water, that I could let go of the stress of deadlines and office politics. But that Saturday, peace was about to become a distant memory. I was adjusting my bait when I heard voices sharp, angry ones cutting through the calm. At first, I thought someone was in trouble, maybe a kid who'd wandered too close to the water. But as the voices grew louder, I realized they were aimed at me. I looked up to see four figures marching along the shoreline, moving with the kind of purpose that screamed trouble. Leading the pack was a woman in her late 50s, her face flushed with indignation, her finger pointed at me like a prosecutor in a courtroom. Behind her trailed three others, their expressions mirroring hers, as if they'd rehearsed their outrage. "You there," the woman shouted as they closed in. "You cannot be here. This is private property, and you're trespassing." I blinked, confused, glancing at the public access sign just 10 feet away. Blue Water Lake was city-owned, open to all. I checked the regulations on the city's website just last week. "I'm sorry, ma'am," I said, keeping my voice steady, "but this is a public lake. I've been fishing here for years." The woman's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a sneer. "Not anymore," she snapped. Without warning, she lunged forward, grabbed my fishing rod from my hands, and raised it above her head. Before I could react, she brought it down hard across her knee. The crack of splintering fiberglass echoed across the water, louder than a gunshot in the quiet afternoon. She tossed the broken pieces into the lake, where they landed with a splash and sank slowly out of sight. I stood frozen, my mouth open, watching my rod disappear. It wasn't just any rod, it was the one I'd used to catch my first bass, the one I'd carried through countless weekends of solitude and reflection. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the gentle waves and the distant chatter of other lakegoers. The woman, whose name I'd later learn was Evelyn Carter, smirked with satisfaction. "Maybe now you'll listen," she said. Her companion's a tall man in a golf visor, a younger woman with a phone already recording, and a stocky guy nodding like a loyal henchman stood behind her, emboldened by her act. I felt my pulse quicken, a mix of shock and anger rising in my chest. But I'd learned long ago that losing your cool rarely solves anything. So, I took a deep breath and tried to make sense of what had just happened. Blue Water Lake had always been a haven, but things had started changing about a year ago when a new housing development, Lakeside Meadows, sprang up on the northern shore. The homes were stunning, big, modern, with lawns that looked like they belonged in a magazine. But with them came a homeowners association that acted like it owned the whole lake. I'd heard stories from other regulars. Dog walkers scolded for letting their pets near the water. Kayakers told they were disturbing the peace. Families asked to move their picnics. The ringleader was always Evelyn, known around town as the Lake Karen for her relentless entitlement. I'd avoided trouble until that day. I'd arrived at my spot around 1 p.m., set up my chair, and organized my tackle box with the precision that made fishing my escape. The weather was perfect, the kind of day that made you grateful to be alive. I'd just cast my line when I spotted them coming from the direction of Lakeside Meadows, their eyes scanning the shore like they were on a mission. Evelyn led the charge, her posture radiating authority she didn't have. As they approached, I tried to focus on my bobber, hoping they'd pass by. No such luck. "Excuse me." Evelyn's voice sliced through the air. "You with the fishing pole, pack up and leave. This area is under Lakeside Meadows HOA jurisdiction, and fishing isn't allowed." I looked up, meeting her gaze. "Ma'am, this is Blue Water Lake, a public recreation area. I've got every right to be here." I gestured to the sign behind me, which clearly stated the lake's public status. The man in the golf visor, whom I'd later learn was Gerald, stepped forward, holding a camera. "Actually," he said, "the HOA has an agreement with the city. All activities here need our approval." His tone was smug, like he expected me to cower. "That's news to me," I replied. "I'd like to see that agreement." I checked the city's website, and there was no mention of any HOA control. Gerald hesitated, his confidence faltering. The younger woman, Melissa, was already recording, her phone aimed at me like a weapon. "Are you refusing to comply with lawful instructions?" she asked, as if she were a cop. "I'm refusing to leave a public lake based on claims with no proof," I said. Evelyn's face reddened, her hands on her hips. "We don't need to show you anything. This is our neighborhood, and we're protecting our property values." "Your property ends at your lawn," I pointed out. "This lake belongs to everyone." That was the wrong thing to say. Evelyn's eyes flashed. "Listen, you selfish man," she spat. "We didn't pay $500,000 for lakefront homes so people like you could clutter our view." The phrase, "people like you," hung in the air, loaded with unspoken assumptions. I felt my temper stir, but kept it in check. "The lake was public when you bought your house," I said calmly. "If you wanted a private lake, you should have bought one." The stocky man, Roger, chimed in. "You're being obstinate. We're maintaining community standards, and your presence doesn't fit." I glanced at my setup: a chair, a tackle box, a rod. I always cleaned up after myself, leaving no trace. "What about fishing doesn't fit?" I asked. Evelyn gestured at my gear. "This is an eyesore. Our residents paid for unobstructed views, and your junk ruins the aesthetic." Junk. My chair was hardly a campsite. I almost laughed, but held it together. "I get that you want to protect your investment," I said, "but you can't block public property because you don't like it." Gerald was snapping photos now, announcing, "We're documenting this violation." "Violation? Fishing in a fishing area?" Evelyn's voice rose to a shout. "Your disrespect for our community is a violation. You're ruining everyone's enjoyment." Her outburst drew eyes. A family at a picnic table turned to watch. An older couple on the walking path paused, their faces curious. "Ma'am," I said quietly, "you're the one disturbing people." That pushed her over the edge. Her face turned purple, and she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Let me be clear. The Lakeside Meadows HOA has connections: City Council, Parks Department, police. Keep causing trouble, and we'll make sure you never fish here again." The threat hit hard. Whether her connections were real or not, the intent was clear: intimidation. "Are you threatening me?" I asked. "I'm explaining reality," she sneered. Melissa moved closer, filming my face now, hoping for a reaction. Gerald kept snapping photos. Roger muttered about community standards. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Then it happened. Evelyn grabbed my rod and snapped it, the crack echoing like a slap. For a moment, time stopped. Evelyn stood there, holding the broken pieces, her chest heaving. Her group looked stunned, as if they hadn't expected her to go that far. I stared at the rod, memories flashing me: first base, quiet mornings, the weight of it in my hands. "There," Evelyn said, panting. "Now maybe you'll take us seriously." She tossed the pieces into the lake. "Oops," she added with a smirk. Melissa laughed, still filming. Gerald grinned, saying, "Should have left when you had the chance." The casual cruelty left me speechless. This wasn't about property values, it was about power. Other lakegoers looked on, shocked but silent. The family at the picnic table stood, unsure whether to step in. The older couple moved closer, their faces outraged. But no one spoke. Evelyn's group had created an atmosphere of fear, turning everyone into bystanders. Anger surged through me, my hands shaking. Every instinct screamed to confront her, to demand she replace my rod. But I did something else. I pulled out my phone and started recording. "What are you doing?" Evelyn demanded, her smirk gone. "Documenting," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You destroyed my property. I want a record." I panned across their faces. Gerald turned away, but I'd already caught him. Melissa lowered her phone, realizing being filmed wasn't as fun. Roger stammered. "You can't record us without permission." "This is a public place," I replied. "No expectation of privacy." Evelyn stepped forward, but I kept filming. "Turn that off, or we'll call the police." "Great idea," I said, dialing 911. Her eyes widened as I connected with the dispatcher. "Hi. I'd like to report destruction of property at Blue Water Lake. A woman broke my fishing rod and threw it in the water." Evelyn waved her hands, whispering. Evelyn's panicked whisper cut through the tense air. Wait, let's talk about this." But I was already giving the 911 dispatcher the details: location, number of people involved, and a clear account of Evelyn breaking my rod. The dispatcher's calm voice confirmed officers were on their way and asked me to stay put. I hung up and faced Evelyn's group, my phone still recording. "They're sending someone," I announced. "This should be interesting." The dynamic shifted like a storm rolling in. Evelyn's smug confidence evaporated, replaced by a flicker of fear. Her squad, Gerald with his camera, Melissa with her phone, Roger nodding nervously, looked like they were rethinking their life choices. Evelyn tried to regain control, her voice sharp but unsteady. "This is ridiculous. We were just enforcing community standards, and you escalated it by refusing to cooperate." "I escalated it?" I asked, incredulous. "You broke my rod and threw it in the lake." I held up my phone, the video still running. "It's all here: your deliberate actions, your oops comment, everything." Melissa stepped forward, her phone now tucked away. "Maybe we can work something out," she said, her tone softer. "We can compensate you for the rod if you're reasonable about the underlying issue." "The underlying issue," I said firmly, "is you claiming authority over a public lake. There's nothing to negotiate. I have every right to fish here." As we waited for the police, something remarkable happened. The lake's other visitors, who'd been watching from a distance, started closing in. First came an elderly couple, Harold and Martha, who'd been walking the trail. Harold addressed me directly, ignoring Evelyn. "We saw everything," he said, his voice steady. "We'll tell the police what happened. That woman had no right to destroy your property." Martha nodded, her eyes fierce. "We've been coming here for 20 years. Never seen anything so outrageous." Their support felt like a lifeline, a reminder I wasn't alone. Next, a family from the picnic table approached. The father, James, looked at Evelyn as he spoke. "My kid saw you break that man's rod." I had to explain why an adult would act like that. I couldn't find a good answer. His wife, Sarah, added, "This is a public lake. You don't get to bully people out." Evelyn's face reddened, but this time it wasn't anger, it was embarrassment. "You don't understand," she protested. "We're protecting this area for everyone by keeping people from using it." The irony was glaring, and Martha didn't let it slide. Keeping people from using a public lake? That's nonsense. More people gathered. A jogger, panting from his run, asked what was going on. A group of teenagers from the boat launch wandered over, curious. Each new arrival tipped the balance further against Evelyn's squad. I could see her group shrinking, their bravado crumbling under the weight of the crowd's disapproval. While we waited, I called the city's parks department. The woman who answered confirmed what I knew. Blue Water Lake was public, with no recent changes to access rules. No private group, including the Lakeside Meadows HOA, had any authority here. "Would you speak to the police about this?" I asked. "Absolutely," she replied. "I can email you the regulations, too." I thanked her and hung up, catching Evelyn's eye. She looked like she wanted to disappear. Her group huddled, whispering urgently. I caught snippets, didn't mean to, lawyers, property values. They knew they'd crossed a line, and the approaching police sirens only deepened their unease. 2 officers arrived about 15 minutes later, pulling into the parking lot and walking down to the shore. The female officer, Sergeant Linda Hayes, was clearly in charge, her notepad ready. Her younger partner, Officer Ryan Cole, scanned the crowd. "Who called about property damage?" Hayes asked. I raised my hand. "That was me, Tom Harper." I explained everything: me routine fishing, the HOA's demands, Evelyn's destruction of my rod. I showed Hayes the video, letting Evelyn's actions speak for themselves. The audio was clear, her smug oops as she tossed the rod into the lake. I pointed to the water where the pieces had sunk and described the rod's sentimental value, a $75 spinning rod I'd owned for 7 years. Hayes turned to Evelyn. "Your version of events, ma'am?" Evelyn straightened, reverting to her earlier script. "We were maintaining community standards. This man was belligerent, refusing reasonable requests to move his equipment to a less visible area." "What authority do you have to make those requests?" Hayes asked, her tone neutral but pointed. Evelyn faltered. We represent the Lakeside Meadows HOA. Our residents have significant investments in lakefront property. Hayes frowned. This is a public lake. HOAs don't have jurisdiction over city property. Gerald jumped in, claiming an agreement with the city, but when Cole asked for documentation, he had nothing. The crowd murmured, sensing the HOA's claims unraveling. Hayes asked me to confirm where the rod was broken. I pointed to my spot, in the water. Did anyone else see this? She asked. Harold and Martha stepped forward, followed by James and Sarah. Even the jogger and a few teenagers nodded, offering to share what they'd witnessed. Hayes turned back to Evelyn. Did you break this man's rod? It was an accident, Evelyn said weakly. I was moving his equipment, and it slipped. Ma'am, Hayes said, I have multiple witnesses saying you deliberately broke it and threw it in the water. Plus, there's video. She reviewed my footage again, her expression hardening. Based on this, I'm citing you for destruction of property, a misdemeanor with potential fines and restitution. Evelyn looked stunned. But he was trespassing. No, he wasn't, Hayes said firmly. I've confirmed with the Parks Department this is public property, open for fishing. You had no right to ask him to leave or destroy his property. Cole was taking witness statements, collecting names and numbers. Melissa tried to slip away, but he asked her to stay, noting her role in the confrontation. Hayes addressed the HOA group. Is anyone else part of this association? Gerald, Melissa, and Roger raised their hands reluctantly. Let me be clear, Hayes said. You have no authority here. If I hear about you harassing citizens lawfully using this lake, you'll face disorderly conduct charges or worse. She turned to the crowd, her voice carrying. This lake is for everyone fishing, boating, walking, anything within the rules. No private group can restrict access. The onlookers nodded, a ripple of agreement spreading. Gerald tried to salvage things. Officer, we're just concerned about property values. Property values aren't a police matter, Hayes said. Take it up with the city through proper channels. Evelyn's citation came with a court date. Hayes explained I'd likely get restitution for the rod, asking about its value. About $75 when I bought it, I said. But it meant more than that. Evelyn's face paled, facing charges over a $75 rod was hitting her hard. Her group got warnings about harassment and a stern reminder to learn their legal limits. Hayes handed me a case number and the Parks Department contact info for future issues. As the officers wrapped up, the HOA squad slunk back toward Lakeside Meadows, avoiding eye contact. The crowd began to disperse, but several people approached me. Harold shook my hand. Good for you, standing up to them. People like that think they own the world. James added, my kids learned something today about doing what's right. Even the teenagers chimed in, one saying, that lady was way out of line. We fish here all the time, no problem. As the sun dipped lower, I sat back in my chair, my tackle box useless without a rod. The afternoon I'd planned was gone, but something else had taken its placidus sense of resolve. This wasn't just about me or my rod. It was about a principle. Public spaces belong to everyone, not just the loudest or richest. I packed up slowly, reflecting on the day. Evelyn's actions were about control, not community. But the support from strangers, Harold, Martha, James, even the kids showed me something stronger, a shared belief in fairness. As I loaded my gear into my truck, I felt a quiet pride. I'd stood my ground, and others had stood with me. Driving home, I wondered what would happen next. Would Evelyn's HOA back off, or would they double down? Would the lake stay open to all, or would their connections cause trouble? One thing was certain, I wasn't done fishing at Bluewater Lake. Not by a long shot. The days following the confrontation at Bluewater Lake felt like the calm after a storm. My routine returned weekday mornings at the insurance office, poring over claims under fluorescent lights, and evenings at my modest Franklin apartment, where I'd sip coffee and replay the events in my mind. But something had shifted. Bluewater Lake wasn't just my escape anymore. It was a battleground, a place where I'd stood up for something bigger than myself. The memory of Evelyn Carter snapping my rod, her smug oops as she tossed it into the lake, lingered like a bad taste. Yet the support from strangers, Harold, Martha, James, and others gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't expected. I didn't return to the lake that next weekend. My tackle box sat untouched in my closet, useless without a rod. Instead, I spent Saturday digging into the Lakeside Meadows HOA. Online forums and local social media were buzzing with stories about their overreach. A dog walker had been screamed at for letting her lab drink from the lake. A kayaker was told his paddle was too noisy. One post mentioned a family being shooed away from a public picnic area because their grill lowered the aesthetic. The common thread? Evelyn Carter, the HOA's self-appointed enforcer, is leading the charge. I called the Parks Department again, speaking to a supervisor named Karen Ellis. She was unequivocal. Blue Water Lake was city property, and no HOA had any authority there. We've had complaints about lakeside meadows, she admitted. They've been lobbying the city council, claiming public use hurts their property values. But no agreements exist, and none are planned. She promised to send me the latest regulations and offered to escalate any future incidents. Her confidence reassured me, but Evelyn's thread about connections gnawed at the back of my mind. By Monday, I got a call from the municipal court clerk. Evelyn had requested a plea conference, hoping to avoid a full trial on the destruction of property charge. She was offering to pay restitution $75 for the rod plus court costs for a reduced charge. I agreed, not because I cared about the money, but because I wanted closure. The check arrived Thursday, along with a curt note: payment for damages. This resolves all claims. It wasn't an apology, more like a legal checkbox. I deposited it and ordered a new rod, a $120 upgrade with a smoother reel. But the victory felt hollow. The rod wasn't just a tool. It was a piece of my history, and no check could replace that. The following Saturday, I returned to Blue Water Lake, my new rod gleaming in the morning light. As I walked the familiar path to my spot, I noticed something new: a large sign near the entrance, bearing the city seal. It read, Blue Water Lake Public Recreation Area. This facility is owned and operated by the city for all residents. Fishing, boating, walking, and other activities are welcome. Respect shared space. Everyone's welcome. The last line felt personal, like a quiet nod to what had happened. I smiled, set up my chair, and cast my line. The lake was peaceful again, but it carried a new weight, a reminder that this place was worth defending. As I settled in, I thought about the broader implications. Evelyn's HOA wasn't just a local nuisance. They represented a mindset I'd seen growing in Franklin and beyond. New developments brought wealth, but also entitlement, a belief that money could buy control over shared spaces. Blue Water Lake was a microcosm of that struggle: public access versus private ambition. I wondered how many other parks, beaches, or trails were facing similar pressures. About an hour into fishing, I heard footsteps. Expecting trouble, I tensed, but it was Harold, the elderly man who'd witnessed the confrontation. He was alone, moving slowly, his eyes bright with recognition. Mind if I sit? He asked, pointing to a nearby log. Plenty of room, I said, glad for the company. He settled down, gazing at the water. I never thanked you for standing up to that woman, he said. My wife, Martha, and I have been coming here for decades. What she did breaking your rod, it wasn't just about you. It was an attack on all of us. No thanks needed, I replied. I just did what felt right. He nodded. Martha and I have been married 55 years. One thing I've learned: sometimes you have to take a stand, even when it's messy. We sat in comfortable silence, my bobber drifting lazily. The sun climbed higher, casting shadows across the lake. In the distance, kids laughed near the playground, their voices carrying over the water. This lake's got history, Harold said after a while. My dad brought me here in the 50s, before it was a park. Just a wild lake, surrounded by fields. No paths, no signs, just water and woods. Dad said places like this were America's heart, open to anyone, not just the folks with big houses. His words hit home. Sounds like that's still worth fighting for, I said. More than ever, he agreed. Everything's getting carved up these days. Public land turns into private clubs. Parks get sold off. When I saw that woman break your rod, I saw someone trying to steal a piece of what belongs to us all. A tug on my line interrupted us. I reeled in a small crappie, its scales glinting in the sun. I unhooked it gently and released it, watching it dart away. Nice touch, Harold said. You treat the fish with respect. My granddad taught me, I said. Take what you need, give back to the water. Your granddad knew what's what, Harold said, smiling. We talked more, swapping stories about the lake's changes: the paved trails, the accessible piers, the families who now came from all over Franklin. Progress isn't bad, Harold said. It's brought more people here. But there's a difference between opening a place up and locking it down. I thought of Evelyn's vision, her community standards that excluded anyone who didn't fit her aesthetic. What makes people act like that? I asked. Why try to control a public lake? Harold watched a heron glide across the water. Fear, he said finally. Fear there won't be enough if they share. Fear others won't care for it like they do. Fear their fancy houses won't mean as much if everyone's welcome. But this lake's big enough for all of us. Exactly, I said. Fear doesn't change facts. As we spoke, the lake came alive. A young couple with a toddler set up across the shore, their laughter echoing. Teenagers gathered on a pier, joking as they baited their hooks. An older woman with a terrier settled under an oak, her chair like mine. Harold gestured to them. This is what the lake's for. All kinds of people, sharing something beautiful. I felt a deep satisfaction. This was what I'd fought for, not just my fish right, but everyone's right to belong. Harold stood, brushing off his jeans. Time to get back? Martha's probably wondering where I am. Great talking to you, I said. Hope we meet again. We will, he said with a wink. This lake brings the right people together. As he walked off, I cast again, the rhythm of the water soothing me. The confrontation had been ugly, but it had revealed something powerful, a community willing to stand up for what's right. That evening, I got an email from Karen at the Parks Department. Attached were the lake's regulations, along with a note. We're aware of the HOA's actions and are working with the City Council to ensure public access is protected. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. It felt like another small victory, but I knew the fight wasn't over. Evelyn's connections might still stir trouble, and Lakeside Meadows wasn't likely to back down quietly. Over the next week, I noticed posts on local forums praising the new sign at Bluewater Lake. People shared their run-ins with the HOA, from petty complaints to outright harassment. A few mentioned seeing Evelyn and her crew lurking near the shore, watching but not engaging. It was clear they were regrouping, not retreating. I started wondering what their next move would be and whether I'd be ready for it. The following Saturday, I was back at my spot, my new rod feeling more like an extension of myself. The lake was busier than usual, with families, anglers, and walkers enjoying the crisp fall air. I was baiting a hook when a woman approached Sarah from the picnic table family. Tom, right? She said, smiling. I just wanted to say thanks. What you did, it's made a difference. People feel safer coming here now. Her words caught me off guard. I didn't do much, I said. Just stood my ground. That's more than most, she replied. My kids keep asking about the fishing guy who fought the mean lady. You're their hero. We laughed, and she invited me to join their picnic later. I promised to stop by, feeling a warmth I hadn't expected. The lake was becoming more than a place to fish. It was a community, knit together by shared values. As I cast my line, I thought about Harold's stories, Sarah's gratitude, and the new sign. Bluewater Lake was a symbol now, a reminder that public spaces are only as open as the people willing to defend them. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Evelyn's HOA was still out there, plotting their next move. Would they try to intimidate others? Lobby the city? Or had they learned their lesson? The crisp October air greeted me as I pulled into the Bluewater Lake parking lot the following Saturday, my new fishing rod resting in the passenger seat. The lake sparkled under the morning sun, its surface dotted with ripples from early risers casting lines or paddling kayaks. The new city sign stood proudly at the entrance, a quiet declaration of the lake's public status. After the confrontation with Evelyn Carter and the Lakeside Meadows HOA, I'd come to see Bluewater Lake as more than my retreat. It was a shared space, a testament to what happens when people stand up for what's right. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the HOA wasn't done yet. Their silence over the past week felt like the pause before a counterattack. I set up at my usual spot under the oak, the familiar routine grounding me. My tackle box was organized, my chair sank slightly into the earth, and my line hit the water with a satisfying plop. For a moment, everything felt normal. But as I scanned the shoreline, I noticed a small group near the Lakeside Meadows boundary. 3 figures, one with a camera. Gerald, I assumed, was still documenting violations. They weren't approaching, just watching, which was somehow more unsettling than their earlier aggression. Around 10 a.m., Sarah and her family arrived, setting up their picnic table nearby. Her kids, a boy and a girl, about 8 and 10, waved at me, calling out, "Hey, fishing guy." I laughed and waved back, warmed by their enthusiasm. Sarah walked over, a thermos of coffee in hand. "Thought you might want some," she said, pouring me a cup. "James and I were talking we want to do something to keep the lake safe from that HOA. They're still lurking." I nodded, glancing at the distant figures. I saw them earlier. They're not confronting anyone, but they're not gone. I told her about the online chatter posts about the HOA's continued complaints to the city, rumors of a petition to restrict lake access. Sarah's face hardened. "They can't just buy a lake that belongs to everyone. We need to push back." Her determination sparked an idea. "What if we got the community together?" I said, "Not just us, but everyone who uses the lake: anglers, walkers, families. Show the city how much this place means to us." Sarah's eyes lit up. "Like a rally? Or a meeting? We could spread the word online and at the community center." We brainstormed, deciding to organize a Blue Water Lake Day, the next weekend, a family-friendly event with fishing, picnics, and a chance to sign a petition supporting public access. Sarah promised to handle social media, while I'd reach out to the Parks Department and local groups. As we talked, Harold and Martha strolled by, their daily walk bringing them to my spot. "What's this I hear about a rally?" Harold asked, catching the tail end of our conversation. I filled them in, and Martha clapped her hands. "Count us in. We'll bring our neighbors. That HOA needs to know they can't bully this town." Harold added, "I'll talk to some old-timers from the fishing club. They've got stories about this lake that'll make your hair stand on end." Their enthusiasm was contagious. By noon, our plan had grown. The teenagers from the boat launch, who'd witnessed the rod breaking, stopped by, intrigued. "You're the guy who took down the mean lady," one said, grinning. "Can we help?" I suggested they spread the word at their school, maybe bring friends to the event. They agreed, already pulling out their phones to post about it. The lake was buzzing with purpose, a community coming together in a way I hadn't seen before. That afternoon, I caught a decent-sized bass, its fight pulling me back to the moment. As I released it, Sarah's kids cheered from their picnic table, their parents clapping. It was a small victory, but it felt symbolic, like the lake itself was on our side. I packed up early to meet with Karen Ellis from the Parks Department, who'd agreed to discuss our event. At her office, she showed me emails from Lakeside Meadows, demanding oversight of the lake to protect property values. She rolled her eyes. "They're persistent, I'll give them that. But the city council's not budging. Your event could help show them the lake's a community asset, not a private backyard." Karen offered to provide tables and a permit for Blue Water Lake Day, and she suggested inviting a council member to speak. I left her office feeling energized, but also wary. Evelyn's connections with the council, whether real or exaggerated, could complicate things. Back home, I checked the local forums. Posts about our event were gaining traction, with dozens of people pledging to attend. But there were also comments from Lakeside Meadows residents, some reasonable, "We just want a clean lake," and others hostile, calling public users trespassers and riffraff. The divide was clear, and I knew our event would be a flashpoint. The next week flew by. Sarah's social media campaign exploded, with a local news outlet picking up the story: Franklin residents rally to protect Blue Water Lake. I printed flyers, coordinated with the fishing club, and confirmed Councilwoman Diane Patel would attend. Harold and Martha recruited their neighbors, and the teenagers turned Blue Water Lake Day into a trending hashtag. By Friday, we expected over 200 people: anglers, families, even a bluegrass band offering to play for free. Saturday morning, Blue Water Lake was transformed. Tables lined the shore, covered with checkered cloths and piled with food. Kids ran around with fishing rods, guided by volunteers from the fishing club. The band played lively tunes, drawing smiles from the crowd. I stood at the petition table, greeting people and explaining our goal: to send a clear message to the city that Blue Water Lake belonged to everyone. Sarah and James worked the crowd, handing out stickers that read "Keep Blue Water Public." Harold and Martha manned a history display, sharing old photos of the lake from the 50s and 60s, when it was just a wild stretch of water. The turnout was overwhelming. Families I'd never met signed the petition, sharing stories of their lake memories: first fish caught, summer picnics, quiet walks. A group of kayakers paddled in formation, their boats decked with banners supporting public access. Even the jogger from the Confrontation Day showed up, bringing his running club. The sense of unity was palpable, a stark contrast to the HOA's divisive tactics. Around noon, Councilwoman Patel took the microphone, her voice carrying over the crowd. "Bluewater Lake is a treasure for Franklin," she said. "I've heard from some residents who want restrictions, but today shows me what this lake means to our community. I'll take your petition to the council and fight to keep this space open for all." The crowd cheered, and I felt a surge of hope. But as Patel spoke, I noticed a familiar figure on the edge of the crowd, Evelyn Carter, flanked by Gerald and Melissa, their faces grim. They didn't approach, but their presence was a reminder that the HOA wasn't backing down. Gerald was taking photos, probably to spin some narrative about disorderly public use. Melissa held a notebook, jotting down names or signs. Evelyn's eyes locked on mine for a moment, her expression unreadable. I turned back to the petition table, focusing on the next signer, but my stomach tightened. This wasn't over. As the event wound down, the band played a final song, and families began packing up. We'd collected over 300 signatures, far more than we'd hoped. Sarah hugged me, her eyes shining. "This was incredible, Tom. We did this." Harold slapped my back, saying, "You started something big, son." Even the teenagers high-fived me, calling the day epic. I stayed late to clean up, watching the sunset paint the lake gold. The new sign gleamed in the fading light, a quiet promise that we'd won this round. But that night, I got a call from Karen Ellis. "Tom, I heard about your event, great work. But I need to warn you. The HOA submitted a formal complaint to the council, claiming your event violated noise ordinances and endangered the lake's ecosystem. It's nonsense, but they're pushing hard. They've got a lawyer and a meeting scheduled with the council next week." My heart sank. Evelyn's connections were real enough to make noise, and I knew they'd spin Bluewater Lake Day as a problem, not a celebration. I thanked Karen and hung up, staring at my new rod propped against the wall. The lake was ours, but the fight was far from over. The HOA's complaint could sway the council, especially if they had allies in high places. I thought of Harold's stories, Sarah's kids, the kayakers, and the band, ordinary people who'd shown up for something bigger than themselves. We'd built a community, but now we had to defend it against a well-funded machine. The next morning, I met Sarah and Harold at a coffee shop to plan our next steps. We agreed to attend the council meeting, armed with our petition and a list of supporters willing to speak. Karen promised to provide data on the lake's public usage, showing its value to Franklin. But as we talked, I couldn't shake the image of Evelyn's face in the crowd, her silent promise of retaliation. Would our grassroots effort be enough against their influence? Or would Bluewater Lake become another casualty of wealth and power? The week leading up to the city council meeting felt like preparing for a courtroom showdown. Bluewater Lake had become more than a fishing spot. It was a symbol of Franklin's heart, a place where ordinary people could push back against entitlement. But the Lakeside Meadows HOA, led by Evelyn Carter, wasn't going down quietly. Their complaint claiming our Bluewater Lake Day event caused noise violations and environmental harm was a calculated move to paint public use as a problem. With a lawyer and rumored council connections, they had resources we didn't. Still, the community's response to our event gave me hope. We had 300 petition signatures, a stack of supporter statements, and a growing network of lake users ready to fight. Sarah, Harold, and I met daily, strategizing at a Franklin diner over coffee and pie. Sarah had rallied online support, turning our hashtag into a local movement. Posts flooded social media with photos from the event, kids fishing, kayakers gliding, families laughing. Harold reached out to his fishing club, securing 10 members to speak at the meeting. I coordinated with Karen Ellis at the Parks Department, who provided usage data. Over 10,000 visitors annually, from school groups to retirees, all using Bluewater Lake legally and responsibly. Councilwoman Diane Patel, who'd spoken at our event, promised to champion our cause, but warned that 2 council members leaned toward Lakeside Meadows, swayed by their campaign donations. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Evelyn's thread about her connections, and the moment she snapped my rod. That act of destruction had sparked this fight, but it also revealed her mindset, control at any cost. I wondered what drove her fear of losing status. A need to dominate? Harold's words echoed. Fear doesn't respond to logic. Yet logic was our weapon: facts, numbers, and the voices of Franklin's people. The council chambers were packed that Tuesday evening, a mix of lake regulars, Lakeside Meadows residents, and curious locals. Sarah, Harold, Martha, and I sat near the front, our petition and data organized in folders. The teenagers from the boat launch were there, wearing Keep Bluewater Public stickers. James and his kids waved from the back, their presence a reminder of what we were fighting for. The air buzzed with tension as the council called the meeting to order. The HOA's lawyer, a slick man in a tailored suit, spoke first. He presented their complaint, claiming Bluewater Lake Day disrupted their quiet enjoyment and harmed the lake's ecosystem with excessive foot traffic. He showed photos Gerald had taken: crowded tables, kids running, kayaks on the water framed as chaos. Our clients invested in lakefront homes expecting a serene environment, he said. Public overuse threatens property values and safety. We propose a permitting system to regulate activities, managed by Lakeside Meadows for efficiency. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others scoffing. I caught Evelyn's eye. She sat ramrod straight, a faint smile on her lips. Councilwoman Patel countered, her voice steady. Bluewater Lake is a public asset, not a private estate. The Parks Department reports no violations from the event, and usage data shows it's a valued community resource. She introduced Karen, who presented visitor numbers and maintenance records, proving the lake thrived under public use. The HOA's claims lack evidence, Karen said. Their proposed permitting system would effectively privatize a public space, which violates city policy. Then came public comments. Harold went first, his voice carrying the weight of decades. I've fished Bluewater since I was a boy. My dad called it America's promisee, a place for everyone. That woman, he pointed at Evelyn, broke a man's fishing rod because she thinks her house gives her the right to own our lake. Don't let her steal what belongs to us. The crowd erupted in applause, and I saw Evelyn shift uncomfortably. Sarah spoke next, holding up photos from the event. This is what Bluewater Lake looks like when it's loved families, friends, neighbors coming together. The HOA wants to lock it away, but we won't let them. Her passion drew cheers, and James's kids beamed from the back. The teenagers took the mic, one saying, "We're not troublemakers. We just want to fish and hang out. Why should rich people get to decide who's allowed?" Their bluntness sparked laughter and more applause. I was last, my heart pounding as I approached the podium. My name's Tom Harper. 3 weeks ago, Evelyn Carter broke my fishing rod because I wouldn't leave a public lake. She claimed authority she didn't have, threatened me with connections, and tried to bully me out. But this isn't about me, it's about all of us. Bluewater Lake is ours, not hers. Our petition, signed by 300 people, proves Franklin wants it to stay open. Don't let money and power take that away. I held up the petition, and the room roared. Evelyn's smile was gone, her face pale. Lakeside Meadows residents spoke, too, but their arguments faltered. One complained about noise, another about trash, but Karen debunked both. Maintenance crews reported no issues. A few admitted they just wanted control to keep things nice, exposing their real motive. The council's questions grew sharp, especially from Patel, who pressed the lawyer on legal grounds for their proposal. He stammered, unable to cite precedent. After 2 hours, the council voted. Patel moved to reaffirm Bluewater Lake's public status and reject the HOA's permitting system. 4 of 5 members agreed. The 5th, a known Lakeside Meadows ally, abstained. The room exploded in cheers, Sarah hugging me, Harold pumping his fist. Evelyn and her group left quickly, heads down, their lawyer trailing behind. Outside, supporters gathered, thanking us and planning future lake events. The teenagers high-fived me, calling it the best win ever. The next morning, the local paper ran a front-page story, "Franklin reclaims Bluewater Lake." It detailed the meeting, our petition, and the council's decision, with quotes from Patel and me. Social media lit up, with lake users posting victory selfies by the new sign. Karen emailed me a council resolution formalizing the lake's public status, with added funding for maintenance and access improvements. "You made this happen," she wrote. "Thank you." I returned to Bluewater Lake that Saturday, my rod ready, my spot waiting. The lake was alive, anglers casting, kids splashing, walkers chatting. Sarah's family waved from their picnic table, and Harold and Martha strolled by, inviting me to their fishing club's next meetup. I cast my line, the bobber settling into the water's rhythm. A sense of peace washed over me, deeper than ever. This wasn't just about fishing, It was about belonging, about defending a principle that bound us together. Weeks later, I heard Evelyn had stepped down from the HOA board, citing personal reasons. Lakeside Meadows issued a statement, promising to respect public spaces moving forward. Whether it was genuine or damage control, I didn't care. The lake was ours, and we'd proven it. I thought of Harold's dad, calling places like this America's promise. He was right. Blue Water Lake wasn't just water and woods. It was a story of community, resilience, and the power of standing up. As I reeled in a small crappie, I smiled, releasing it back to the lake. The sun dipped low, painting the water gold. This was my sanctuary, but it was also everyone's a place where anyone could cast a line, share a laugh, or find a moment of peace. And we'd made sure it would stay that way, for this generation and the next. Thank you for joining me on this journey at Blue Water Lake. This story isn't just about a fishing rod or a lake, it's about standing up to injustice, fighting for what's fair, and the power of community when we come together. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever faced a situation where someone tried to take what wasn't theirs? How do you feel about using intimidation or even violence to assert control, like Evelyn did? Share your perspective, whether you agree with Tom's approach, think the HOA had a point, or have your own story of standing up for what's right. Let's keep the conversation going and make sure voices like ours are heard.